Welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into a book that basically explains why your computer is suddenly smarter than you are. We are breaking down Genius Makers by Cade Metz. Now look, everyone is talking about AI these days. You use it to write your emails, fix your code, or maybe you just use it to generate pictures of cats wearing astronaut suits. But it wasn't always like that. In fact, for a long time, the people who built the technology behind ChatGPT and Google Gemini were considered the biggest losers in the tech world. Seriously, they were the outcasts, the weirdos in the basement. This book tells the story of how a small group of stubborn geniuses survived decades of ridicule to eventually sell their brains to the highest bidder and change the world. So, grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's talk about how the geeks inherited the earth. Before we jump in, do me a huge favor. If you want to get smarter without actually having to read thousands of pages, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It tells the YouTube algorithm that you have excellent taste. And honestly, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me if you think AI is going to save us or if we are all going to end up working for a robot overlord named Steve. I read every comment, so let me know what you think. All right, let's get into it. The first big lesson from this book is something I like to call the cult of the neural net. To understand where we are today, you have to understand where we came from. For decades, the field of artificial intelligence was dominated by people who thought the brain was like a filing cabinet. They thought if you wanted a computer to recognize a cat, you had to write a rule that said cats have pointy ears, and another rule that said cats have whiskers, and another rule that said cats ignore you when you call their name. This was called symbolic AI, and it was very logical. It was also completely useless for anything messy like understanding human speech or recognizing faces. But there was this other group of researchers, led by a guy named Geoff Hinton. These guys had a different idea. They said, hey, why don't we build a machine that mimics the human brain? Let's create layers of digital neurons that learn by example rather than by rules. This is called a neural network. Today, this is the standard, but back in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, saying you believed in neural networks was like walking into a physics department and saying you believe in magic crystals. It was career suicide. Hinton and his crew were literally banished to the academic wilderness. They couldn't get funding, they were kicked out of conferences, they were basically the flat earthers of computer science, except they were actually right. This period is known as the AI winter. It was cold, it was dark, and nobody cared about them. But here's the lesson. Stubbornness is a superpower if you're right. Hinton didn't pivot. He didn't chase the latest trend. He just kept working on his digital brains in Canada, funded by a weirdly obscure agency, waiting for computers to get fast enough to make his math work. It's like buying Bitcoin in 2009 and holding it while everyone tells you it's imaginary internet money. Eventually, the world catches up. The second lesson is what I call the ImageNet moment, or the day the toddler finally used the toilet. For a neural network to work, it needs two things: massive amounts of data and massive computing power. By the year 2012, we finally had both. There was this competition called ImageNet, where computers had to look at millions of photos and identify what was in them. For years, the error rate was huge. Computers were terrible at it. They would look at a picture of a dog and say it was a toaster. But in 2012, Geoff Hinton and two of his students, one of whom was Ilya Sutskever, who later co-founded OpenAI, entered a neural network called AlexNet, and they absolutely crushed everyone. It wasn't even close. They dropped the error rate by a massive margin. It was the moment the industry woke up. It was like watching a kid who has been tripping over his own feet for 10 years suddenly run a 4-minute mile. Suddenly, Google, Microsoft, and Baidu realized that this wasn't magic crystals. This was the future of everything. This leads us to the wildest part of the book, which is the auction. This is lesson number 3, and it is simply this: talent is the most expensive resource on Earth. After they won that competition, Hinton and his students didn't just accept a job offer. They were smart. They incorporated their tiny little research group into a company with no products, no revenue, and no business plan, and said, "We are for sale." They set up an auction. It was literally Google versus Microsoft versus Baidu, creating a bidding war for 3 guys who were basically academics. The price went up and up. We are talking millions of dollars. Baidu would bid, then Google would bid, then Microsoft would bid. It was like eBay, but for human brains. Eventually, the price got so high that Hinton stopped the auction because he felt like it was getting ridiculous, and they went with Google. This moment changed Silicon Valley. It shifted the power dynamic. Suddenly, if you knew how to build deep learning systems, you were like an NBA superstar. Companies started hoarding scientists like they were collecting Pokemon cards. Mark Zuckerberg even personally flew around trying to recruit Jan LeCun, another giant in the field, to start Facebook's AI lab. It shows you that when a technology shift happens, the people who understand it first get paid like royalty. Now let's talk about DeepMind. This is another major player in the book. DeepMind was this mysterious startup in London founded by Demis Hassabis. Demis is a total character. He was a child chess prodigy, a video game designer, and a neuroscientist. His goal wasn't just to make a better search engine. His goal was to solve intelligence and then use that to solve everything else. The lesson here is about reinforcement learning. If Hinton's neural networks were like teaching a computer to see, DeepMind's approach was like teaching a computer to play. They built an AI that learned to play old Atari games just by looking at the pixels on the screen. It didn't know the rules. It just knew that if it did certain things, the score went up. There is this famous moment where the AI is playing the game Breakout. You know, the one where you bounce the ball to break the bricks? At first, the AI is terrible. It keeps missing the ball. But after a few hundred games, it gets decent. Then, after a few thousand games, it discovers a glitch in the matrix. It figures out that if it tunnels a hole through the side of the wall, the ball gets stuck at the top and breaks all the bricks automatically. The developers didn't teach it that. It learned it. It was like watching a laboratory rat figure out how to pick the lock on its cage. Google saw this and bought DeepMind for hundreds of millions of dollars, even though, once again, they had no product. They just had really, really smart people. This led to the famous AlphaGo match. This is the Rocky Balboa moment of the book. DeepMind built an AI to play Go, an ancient board game that is infinitely more complex than chess. Everyone said a computer wouldn't beat a human at Go for at least another 10 years. It requires intuition, not just calculation. They put AlphaGo up against Lee Sedol, one of the greatest human players ever. And in the second game, the AI made a move, Move 37, that was so weird, so human, and so creative that the commentators thought it was a mistake. But it wasn't. It was brilliant. It broke the human spirit. Lee Sedol eventually lost the series 4-1. It proved that AI wasn't just copying us anymore. It was starting to think in ways we didn't understand. But it's not all victory laps and fat paychecks. The book also dives deep into the drama, specifically the beef between Elon Musk and Larry Page. This is lesson number 5, the safety war. Years ago, Elon Musk and Larry Page, the co-founder of Google, used to be close friends. They would hang out at gaming apartments and talk about the future, but they had a massive falling out over AI. Larry Page is an optimist. He believes that if AI becomes smarter than humans, that's just the next step in evolution. He thinks digital life is just as valid as biological life. If the robots take over, hey, good for them. Elon Musk, on the other hand, thinks that sounds absolutely terrifying. He looks at AI and sees the Terminator. He thinks if we're not careful, we're going to accidentally build a god that treats us like ants. This disagreement is actually why OpenAI was founded. Elon Musk and Sam Altman started OpenAI as a non-profit to build safe AI that belongs to humanity, specifically to counter Google's dominance. It's ironic now, considering how closed and corporate OpenAI has become, but originally it was supposed to be the rebel alliance fighting against the Google empire. The book paints this picture of a divided community. On one side, you have the accelerationists who want to push the pedal to the floor and see what happens. On the other side, you have the safetyists who are screaming that the bridge is out. And in the middle, you have these brilliant scientists like Hinton who are starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they built something a little too powerful.
In fact, later on, Hinton actually left Google so he could speak freely about the dangers of the technology he helped create. It's like Dr. Frankenstein looking at the monster and saying, you know what, maybe I shouldn't have given him the abnormal brain. Another key theme in the book is the sheer amount of resources this takes. We like to think of coding as this democratic thing, where a kid in a garage can build the next Facebook. And sure, that used to be true. But modern AI, that is a rich man's game. The models we have today, like GPT-4, cost hundreds of millions of dollars to train. They require data centers the size of football fields and enough electricity to power a small city. The book makes it clear that we've moved from the era of the eccentric professor to the era of the industrialist. The power is concentrating. It's not the universities driving this anymore. It's the trillion-dollar corporations. If you want to be a researcher and do cutting-edge work, you basically have to work for Google, Meta, Microsoft, or OpenAI. They're the only ones with the compute. It's like if you wanted to be an astronomer, but the only people who owned telescopes were Amazon and Walmart. It creates a complicated dynamic where the future of human intelligence is locked behind corporate NDAs. So, what is the ultimate takeaway from Genius Makers? It's that the AI revolution wasn't an accident. It was a war. It was a war of ideas, a war for talent, and a war for the future. The people who won this war were the ones who were willing to look foolish for decades. They were the ones who believed in a theory that everyone else mocked. But it's also a warning. The technology they built is now growing faster than even they expected. We're living through a transition that is just as big as the invention of electricity or the printing press. The characters in this book, Hinton, LeCun, Hassabis, Musk, Zuckerberg, they've set something in motion that cannot be turned off. The genie is out of the bottle, and the genie is really good at math and writing poetry. For you and me, the lesson is pretty simple. Adaptability. The landscape is shifting under our feet. The skills that were valuable 5 years ago might not be valuable 5 years from now. But just like the neural networks in the book, we have to learn. We have to update our weights and biases. We have to figure out how to work alongside these systems rather than getting run over by them. This book is a fascinating look at the humans behind the machines. It reminds us that AI isn't just code. It's a reflection of the people who built it, their ambitions, their rivalries, their fears, and their brilliance. It's a messy, chaotic human story about a technology that might eventually surpass humanity. That's the breakdown of Genius Makers. If you enjoyed this, seriously hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to build my own neural network of smart subscribers here. And don't forget to comment. Are you Team Larry Page, thinking let the robots take over? Or are you Team Elon, thinking we need to build a bunker? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Keep learning.